Welcome to Actera's second lecture for our spring 2021 lecture series. This lecture is titled Think Globally, Act Locally, East Palo Alto, the Little City That Could. This four-part series delves into cross-sectoral climate solutions already underway in local to global settings. We'll learn from influential leaders who are taking action at many levels to combat climate change, whether it be a social change, corporate operations, or financial markets. My name is Robbie Brown. I'm your host for this evening, and I'm the Community Engagement Associate for Actera. The chat box has been disabled for this event. However, there is a Q&A portion towards the last quarter of this event. If you have a question for our keynote speaker tonight, Regina Wallace-Jones, please use the Q&A tab to submit your question and not the chat box. Actera is an environmental nonprofit based in the Bay Area. To be more specific, we're located within Palo Alto. We're largely driven by environmental problems that are occurring locally and globally, and primarily the problems that have resulted due to climate change. We like to engage our local communities, companies, and agencies in the Bay Area with a focus on Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. We have a wide variety of programming under the categories of electrification, food sustainability, workplace sustainability, and education. Our public lecture series is a part of our educational programming, and our aim is to present a diverse range of views to help advance conversations and allow deeper reflections on challenging issues. Before we begin, we'd like to thank our series underwriters for their support, Marion Clinton Gilliland and Armand and Elian Nukermans, as well as our series sponsors, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and the Foster and Palo Alto. We have a few events coming up that we'd like to highlight. The next one is March 26th at 5 p.m. Actera is celebrating our work and all of you in our community. This event's going to include award winners, guest speakers, and a plant-based induction cooking demonstration, dancing, music, and more. This event is entitled Promise to Our Planet, and if you're interested in registering, please go to actera.org/events. We also have a Meet the Avengers event on March 31st. Hear how these Stanford students, alumni, faculty, and staff have gained incredible superpowers by going EV. When we say EV, what we mean are electric vehicles. So our Avengers will answer questions about their vehicles, provide tips on rebates and range, charging, and invite you to join their next mission by becoming Avengers in training. On the 2nd of April, we have a special guest, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, giving a presentation, A New Day from Surviving to Thriving, where he'll be discussing systems, policy, resilience, and how we can get to a better place. The 6th of April, we have Green at Home Solar Rooftops, where you can learn about the benefits of residential solar panels, contractors' rebates, and the procedure to optimize solar panel installations. And on Earth Day, April 22nd, we have our Silicon Valley Green Team Network 2021 Spring Forum, Organizational Climate Change, where you can learn how to incite organizational climate change from Plan C advisors. They are a Bay Area-based consultancy. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our event. I'm going to hand it off to Twilight Sayana, the Director of Climate Resilient Communities, who's going to give some welcoming remarks and introduce our keynote speaker, Regina Wallace-Jones. Violet, please take it away.
Thank you, Robbie. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my name is Twilight Sayana, and I'm the Executive Director for Climate Resilient Communities. CRC is a community-based organization that is dedicated to enacting community-led solutions that foster unity, connections, and resilience. In today's lecture, you are going to learn from our guest speaker, local actions and commitments at the city level to address climate change and other key environmental issues faced by East Palo Alto residents. The city of East Palo Alto is resilient, but also vulnerable to sea level rise and climate change extremes, such as heat waves and flooding. It is a great honor for me to have this task of introducing our key speaker today. Regina Wallace is the Senior Vice President of Product and Engineering at Mindbody, a technology platform focused on health and wellness, which was recently included in Fast Company's 2021 list of world's most innovative companies. In 2018, Regina was elected to the East Palo Alto City Council and served as mayor of the city until December of last year. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Stanford University and a master's from UCLA in public policy with emphasis in technology policy. She is the founding board president of StreetCode Academy, a patron of Black Girls Code, a partner of the Lean In Foundation, which advocates for women pursuing their professional ambitions. She also serves as a board member of Women Who Code, a board member of Anamatangi Polynesian Voices, and a member and advisor to the East Palo Alto Climate Change Community Team. She is also on the advisory board of Climate Resilient Communities. She is a compassionate person and cares deeply about people and her city of East Palo Alto. Her efforts and accomplishments in the community focus on projects and policies that improves people's lives. It is my honor to welcome and introduce you to our Honorable Council Member, Regina Wallace-Jones.
Thank you, Violet. So incredibly special. I always loved listening to introductions because I find myself saying, who is she talking about? That is so cool. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. And I begin by expressing deep gratitude to Actera, who has for many years taken an interest in East Palo Alto and who dutifully worked alongside our residents to empower strength and mobilization and action. And the most important part is action to support our aspirations for a healthy environment and for environmental justice. And I also express deep gratitude to Violet, who makes herself available mornings and late night. She even jumped on a call with me at 11:30 last night after City Council meeting, and everything in between to drive focus on mobilizing our residents to be self-determined and empowered to drive change. Today, I also want to express gratitude and thanks to our friends, our colleagues, our partners, and our residents who have joined and/or who are part of the incredible story that is East Palo Alto. I am grateful to and for you, and I welcome you today. As I mentioned, and as was mentioned, I'm Regina Wallace-Jones, the current council member for the city of East Palo Alto and the immediate past mayor of the same. This is my third year in elected office, which has given me the pleasure of working on many efforts aimed at improving our environmental posture and stance, as well as our quality of life as residents. But I have tremendous appreciation for all council members that have come before me and who walk alongside me, all committed to and actively engaged on matters of environment in their own respectable, impactful, and tremendous ways. Today I'll be talking, and it's funny, I never thought of myself as a lecturer, so I'm going to choose to use the word talk. I'll be talking about thinking globally and acting locally. East Palo Alto, the little city that could, which is a fitting theme on the heels of a talk that I moderated yesterday with Richard Rothstein, discussing his recent work, The Color of Law. In his book, he specifically points out the conditions that were present and that established East Palo Alto as a majority community of color. And he specifically addresses how the law and legislative bodies assisted in clear and explicit race-based housing discrimination. In announcing the talk, I conjured up the words of Amanda Gorman, our inauguration poet laureate, who taught us that being American is more than a pride that we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. Today is about how East Palo Alto has worked to repair ourselves. And my hope is that in hearing me, you find more ways to help us continue to amplify our affect. I wish to bring forward 3 areas of focus for our joint contemplation today. The first is resourcefulness. The second is collaboration. And the third is high ideals and aspirations. As a junior council member, councilwoman, I remember first joining Violet and the Actera team, and she was working as part of the team at that time as we built the climate change awareness community team. We were specifically focused on empowering residents to conduct survey research to help better understand how the residents of East Palo Alto defined, internalized, and wished for action in the realm of climate change and its related impacts. The community team included youth, young adults, not so young adults, including myself, and participants from just about every ethnicity represented in the city of East Palo Alto. It was and is a thoughtful, diverse, and talented committee, and I grew to admire and respect deeply the commitment of this committee to community and to surfacing issues relevant to the environment. This committee walked door to door, conducted surveys, and hosted focus groups, among other things, and triangulated on 3 areas where additional education and planning were needed in the city of East Palo Alto. The first was in water, the next was in transportation and accessibility, and the third was in disaster and emergency preparedness. And this is where I begin by saying that East Palo Alto has scaled its success in non-traditional ways because it is unlike its surrounding cities in its background and makeup, even as many aspirations for our city are similar to those that we're surrounded by. And East Palo Alto is resourceful in our efforts to unlock talent in all of our people. In fact, as I reflect back on my first year as a resident in the city of East Palo Alto, I remember clearly that it was youth organizers, primarily in YUCA, or Youth United for Community Action, that both alerted me and others in the community and who organized our actions to surface and ultimately shut down ROMIC, an organization that was producing toxic chemical waste and quietly endangering the lives of East Palo Alto residents. This is not uncommon in communities of color. In fact, the color of law calls out that this was an explicit act of zoning discrimination employed by many leaders in many cities across the country, and explains why toxic waste sites are often conveniently located in communities of color. This is something that we all need to continue to pay attention to on a go-forward basis as we look at our decisions and as we drive toward decisions, but also do the appropriate work to unwind bad decisions of the past. The Climate Change Community Team, which was established in March of 2019, had some pretty impressive results. First, they conducted the climate change survey, and that completed in 2020. They also conducted a community vulnerability assessment pilot project, which was also completed in 2020. And if the outcomes of these studies and surveys are of interest, and you find that you want to ask questions about them, I'm really excited that Violet is on this call with me because together we can field some of those questions and answers in Q&A. But this point highlights a very important theme for me. Often when we evaluate difference, and in particular in communities of color, we internalize the difference as lack. My resolve is exactly the opposite of lack. Resourcefulness is one of East Palo Alto's greatest strengths, and it is best personified through the actions of our youth, whose commitments to the city span across a range of issues, including a very clear and powerful focus on the environment and environmental justice. Our youth are very clear that they want to inherit a city that is environmentally better for themselves and for their children. And many youth carry very mature perspectives on how they will motivate, influence, and steer the changes that they want to see, which is amazing. My second thought rests in East Palo Alto's strength in collaboration. You see, not too long ago, East Palo Alto partnered with the Santa Clara County Joint Powers Authority and several other entities to reinforce and protect the city from catastrophes associated with sea level rise by building protective levees along the bay wetlands. Today, we see residents peacefully walking along the wetlands, particularly in COVID-19. It's a nice fresh air outlet, and while walking or riding, we cannot help but notice the beauty of the Bay Wetlands Project. Everything from exquisite rock formations to beautiful bridges and reinforced walkways are clearly there to enjoy, but are more specifically there to protect our residents from the threat of floods, a tragedy that affected many residents prior to the levees being built. Alone, it would have taken East Palo Alto much longer to actualize this incredible goal. In fact, we're not clear that we could have actualized it alone. But the resourcefulness of many and the willingness to identify the resources to accelerate this plan drove a noteworthy outcome for our little city. Of course, this continues with the San Francisco Creek Safer Bay project, which is endeavoring to offer similar protections from the creek to many of our residents. The strategy to advance flood protection, ecosystem restoration, and recreation, or Safer Bay Phase 1 project, will provide direct benefits and overall resiliency to flooding and sea level rise to the disadvantaged city that we are. The objectives are to, 1, remove 1,600 properties from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is FEMA, flood insurance requirements by protecting the community's 100-year coastal flood event. The second is to restore more than 600 acres of former salt ponds using horizontal levees as natural flood protection and to create new and improved habitat for more than 10 special status species. And the third is to enhance public recreation by creating new trails along the bay and atop these new levees. East Palo Alto has set aside $5.5 million for the Safer Bay Phase 1 project and committed to long-term maintenance. The project arose from local input, local advocacy, nonprofits, and a ton of others who engaged with the advisory board and multimedia outreach to inspire and inform the project with ownership, and is being implemented in collaboration with several partners who have joint interests in protecting against sea level rise. East Palo Alto is categorized by MTC as high in its community of concern status, meaning that we have a significant concentration of underserved populations in the city. The city of East Palo Alto also falls within the 65 to 90% percentile range in the Cal EnviroScreen 3.0, including partially being in SB 535 disadvantaged community. Additionally, all census blocks in East Palo Alto northeast of Highway 101 have high or very high social vulnerability to flooding, while being in the 70th percentile for higher for housing cost burden and the 90th percentile for or higher for low income and limited English proficiency compared to the rest of the Bay Area. If you explore the Cal Environs Screen tool and click on East Palo Alto, it will give you more information on each census tracts, highlighting things like population burden and traffic. In the past 3 years, the collaboration in EPA community and leadership has grown in terms of engaging residents and increased community participation. Here, you can, here I'd just like to call out, that these collaborations are deep and wide. They span across multiple groups. And I know Violet mentioned at the beginning a number of groups for which I serve as an advisory member or a board member. It's so incredible to see across all of the organizations that I engage with at the board level, just how many are digging into this issue. Everything from how can we affect it from a technology perspective? How can we affect it from a grassroots organizing perspective? How can we affect it from a youth engagement perspective? How can we engage it from a leadership perspective as well? And when I say leadership in this case, I mean city leadership and staff. So really a very cross-functional view of how to drive impact. In addition to all that I've talked about, East Palo Alto is actively drafting its climate change action plan, and this is under the leadership of Michelle Dyer. It's really incredible to see her work in action because she's also integral to our COVID-19 testing and vaccination, has been a superstar there, and is also parallel processing a climate change action plan and really working to make that a robust work product. We're also as a city working on the East Palo Alto Urban Forest Master Plan. And this project has received some funding from CAL FIRE. Over the last year and a half, we've conducted and completed our mobility study. And to the point raised earlier about a need to focus on transportation and accessibility, these issues were surfaced inside of our mobility study. The City Council accepted the study at the end of last year. In the beginning of this year, we looked at it twice over, if my memory is, if I'm recalling correctly. And now we're working on various pilots that we can test out across the city to make sure that the recommendations that were made actually stick. And this is everything from parking to stop signs to where we need to implement one-way streets to, sort of where we need to make our sidewalks and our streets even more accessible for children who are commuting to school. And for those who just have a need to move themselves around on sidewalks. It's a reasonable thing to do. And we're working feverishly to implement programs that help to support that. And finally, for our EV reach codes, the council accepted reach codes earlier this year and are working with our new developers to help make sure that they comply with the adoption of the reach codes that we approved earlier this year. We've done some tremendous advocacy work, and we continue to do tremendous advocacy work in the community to support the transformation of our own environmental footprint as residents of the city of East Palo Alto. I frequently say that it's an honor, a true honor, to be serving on city council in this moment, and it is. As we collectively serve and support each other through the COVID-19 pandemic, we're actively, I'm tongue-tied sometimes, actively working on shaping the future of our city. We are models of embracing the idea that being American is more than a pride that we inherit. It's a past that we step into and how we repair it. And we're proud of our identity as a little city that packs a powerful impact. We also invite partners to the table to continue to envision an extraordinary future, because it's actually the power and agency to envision a beautiful and more widely expansive future. a cleaner future that excites us, coupled with the will to actualize the future in amazing and creative, new and imaginative ways. With that, I want to take pause on my formal remarks and open the door for Q&A from our very capable audience that's joined us today.
Thank you so much, Regina. So our first question today comes from Larry. Larry says, I'm a resident of Foster City. Last year, a major project was initiated to upgrade our levees to continue through 2023. I would like to ask the council person if their project is similar to ours as a traditional construction upgrade project. Sounds like there are some differences as we are not reclaiming additional lands to best of my knowledge.
Yeah, so I would need to look into a little bit more the specific details of this project, but this project, at least the Bay Wetlands project, the original one that we completed in 2019, I believe is when we completed that project, was not so much about reclaiming land as much as it was making that land protected against the flooding that frequently occurred during rainy season, and against the fear that some of that flooding would be catastrophic to our residents. And many of our older residents have a very strong reflections of flooding affecting their homes. In fact, some of our seniors talk about their floors being covered with water during storms. And, we've had to, in the past, put out a lot of sandbags and other things to try to hold some of that back, but really wanted to make sure that, in particular for some of our seniors who are not as mobile as they used to be, and also for some of our residents who just need general protection for their homes and their families, that we were putting something in place that made them not so vulnerable. We all remember Katrina and how that affected New Orleans, and we were very keen on not sort of being a replication of that where we know that we were in jeopardy. So the project was, as I said, a joint venture, and there was a lot of new rocks and other things that we brought in to help reinforce against the water. There were new structures that were built. Roads were repaved, or walk paths were repaved, or bike paths were biking and walking paths were repaved. And now it is a beautiful, kind of end to end. And if you walk the entire thing, it's about a 3.3 mile project, which I said was a hugely expensive undertaking, of which East Palo Alto actively paid less than 10% of the total cost. So the idea that we were collaborating and working with other entities who had a joint interest in reinforcing the city against flood protection, against flooding and sea level rise was particularly good for us, because it helped us to seize an opportunity and create safety for a lot of our residents who just needed protection. We see that the San Francisco Creek project as similar in our aspiration, although the fundamentals of the project are a little bit different. And it sounds like the project in Redwood City is an exciting one. I'd love to spend some time with you offline, Larry, talking a little bit more about the project and making sure that I offer as much insight as I can as you navigate your new journey and your new venture in Redwood City.
Thank you, Regina. Our next question is, what do you think is the biggest barrier for other cities doing the right ethical work needed to provide resiliency and environmental justice for their residents?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. This is probably true for most cities. When we talk about things like sea level rise and flooding, these are things that are more subject to things like actuarial science, right? It's sort of people looking at what is the likelihood that something like this is actually going to occur, and how much effort do we need to put against solving for this right now. The problem with disasters and disaster recoveries of this nature is Once they happen, if you're not protected, you typically are very harmed by whatever has happened, right? And so the whole act of making a concrete and an aspirational move to preemptively protect yourself is something that most cities struggle with, because when you're looking at resources, you're often balancing against things that you know right now. For example, you know right now that maybe your pension fund in your city has got, you know, a negative balance, or you might know right now that you've got, you know, 40 years of deferred maintenance on roads and water infrastructure. You might know right now that you need to put a stake in the ground and build more affordable housing because our residents in our communities are clamoring for higher rates of affordability across all of our cities. And when you compare that against something that could happen, but you're not sure exactly when or how, you know, finding the, you know, the focus and the mental strength to put resources in that direction can be difficult relative to, you know, some of the right now things that are happening. What I like to say in East Palo Alto often is that it's typically not necessary to approach any problem as an all or nothing. I think in East Palo Alto, and most cities do this, but in East Palo Alto, we've gotten a lot stronger with how we handle prioritization and figuring out what's really important to us. And in our work of prioritization, we tend to add a collection of things that are short, medium, and long-term priorities. And we try to keep the ball moving down the field on all of them. And so I do encourage our neighboring cities to take a similar stance. Of course, you've got to action the things that are a problem right now that you can see right in front of you, but don't do it at the expense of not investing in some of the future things that will inevitably happen, but we don't know when, and make sure that all around your city and your residents are protected and reinforced from what we know is an inevitable aspect of climate change, global warming, and some of the side effects and derivatives that come from that.
Thank you for such a thoughtful answer. We have a few more questions that came in. The next one is, thank you for your talk so far. This is a bit more of a broad question, not necessarily pertaining to Palo Alto, and more of a conceptual question. How does scaling local action work when it is scaled across different areas with different environments, peoples, cultures, belief systems, and so forth? So how does scaling work at a local action? I deeply believe in the possibility for localization at a global scale to address climate change and inequality. So I would love to hear more about it.
Got it. So, and is the heart of the question, how do you get to scaled impact? Is that the heart of it?
I believe so.
Okay. So, so I'm going to call on a little bit of my other hat that I wear, which is as an executive leader of a tech company. And, you know, typically we like to talk about the flywheel effect, right? What are the collection of things that you can do, which together create momentum and strength in whatever you're trying to bring forward. And in this case, initiatives that are related to climate change, flooding, global warming, and environment. Some of the things that I talked about in my talk are actually really important. For example, it is incredibly important to engage and unlock the power of your people. When we look at a council or city council, for example, there are 5 council members. And for so many reasons, we are limited in how much collaborating that we can do privately. In fact, all conversations are limited to no more than 2 council members. And that's to prevent collusion. But you can imagine that when you're trying to get lots of things done, not being able to collaborate is actually pretty hard. So when you can only get 2 council members that are interacting on any one thing and privately at any given time, it can be limiting if you just start there. What we think has beautifully actualized in East Palo Alto and sometimes we laugh about it, but mostly we're grateful for it. We have over 100 active nonprofits in the city of East Palo Alto that are acting, thinking, moving, activating various parts of our residential base. And we typically call on various nonprofits to help us unlock the power of our people, because all of us is always smarter than any one of us. And really appreciating that, and really, sort of focusing and savoring in that strength of your city is incredibly powerful. The second is partnership. I talked a little bit about collaboration, but we very infrequently ever think of anything that we can and should do on our own. In fact, the city was incorporated in 1983, so it's a relatively young city. And what I love about it, and if I were thinking about it as a company, it's not a company, it's a city. But if I were thinking about it as a company, what I love about the city of East Palo Alto is it has always lived inside of its means. So it finds itself in this very interesting position where our budget is relatively small. We hover around $30 million of budget, which is, when you look at our neighboring cities, we are, percentage points of what our neighboring cities are in terms of their annual budgets. We live inside of that budget. We save, actively to try to buy down things like infrastructure investments and other things that are deferred and delayed. But we find ourselves, even in COVID, and even though we have to adjust, living in not in a state of terror, but in a state where we just have to thoughtfully plan and resize our efforts to live within our new normal budget, which will necessarily be affected by COVID. So when we think about big visions, big pictures, big things that we want to actualize, we're constantly thinking about who we can bring to the table to work with us. So, it's everything from our counties to our neighboring cities to our various JPAs, depending on the topic and the subject matter, to various nonprofit organizations that are operating outside of the city of East Palo Alto, to federal grants. We're always looking for ways that we can actualize our dreams without being able to pay for them expressly on our own, or to fund them or to resource them expressly on our own. And I think I see that as a huge strength. And then the third thing that I will just mention here and leave space for more questions is our dogged commitment to communicating with our residents and with our people. This is actually a strength that has grown over time. Like a lot of cities, we were relying mostly on snail mail as a way to interact with our residents and keep them notified of what's going on. But we found over time that consumers and residents are demanding different ways of engaging, right? A lot are spending more time on social media, a lot of spending, time in their emails and in other digital platforms. And they want to know that their city is accessible and that they can interact with their city in all of the ways that they find normal, right, to receive their information, their updates, et cetera. So we have increased our activation on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We also recognize that language accessibility is really important in the city. And so we do all of our communication translated minimally into Spanish, but we also try to include Tongan and Samoan languages where we can, because we also have a nice concentration of our residents who are Polynesian, and we really treasure their cultural presence here as well. So we try to do that. And what we're finding is that no one way is the right way, but all ways give us greater coverage than we previously had. And so the combination of our own resourcefulness with the combination of our commitment to partnering and collaborating to unlock dollars and capability, assets, resources, et cetera, and also in our aspiration to communicate actively and lively and richly with our residents, we start to find this flywheel effect taking place where our residents then feel empowered to talk about the things that are concerning them, and that drives us to do a better job of planning the things that we could be focusing on, and that drives us to partner more effectively with organizations that can help us get that thing accomplished, and we keep moving around that really important circle to create a magnified and scaled affect. And so for any city outside of East Palo Alto that's watching this, I typically say we have a lot of work to do in terms of driving some of our disciplines into our neighboring cities. Again, a lot of times people evaluate a city like East Palo Alto from a position of lack. And I actually think that we've got really powerful stories, really important lessons to teach, and really powerful ways of helping communities actualize themselves in different ways, because we've had to be a lot more creative about how we get things done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I imagine using and utilizing all those different mediums in terms of communication and language accessibility has been tremendously helpful during this age of COVID, and providing information that way, and distribution of vaccines and so forth. So we got a really interesting question. It says, I often found that it is a challenge for someone like me, white, well-resourced, yet caring, to gain entry into the East Palo Alto community in the same way that I can in Palo Alto, Menlo Park, etc. Can you offer some guidance as to how someone like me can be helpful, other than supporting some of the nonprofits that you have mentioned, which I already do?
Yeah, that's it's a tender question, and it's a great question. Thank you for being vulnerable and asking it. There are two things that I want to say here. The first is we have to remember that a lot of the residents who are still here in East Palo Alto have been here for many decades. And they absolutely remember the story of why they are there to begin with, right? I mean, when you think about, the stories around redlining, right? The stories around not being able to secure houses and mortgages in other cities, the collusion of real estate agents to drive people of color into one specific place, or a specific place that was separated from everyone else because others may have perceived our very presence to be detractors from income value, and from property values rather, and from quality of life. These things obviously were perceptions, perceived, not real. And so when you accumulate that kind of behavior over time, what you build in the people's minds who experience it is an overall resistance to engaging, right? Because they know the truth. They know the truth of their existence. They know the truth of why they're here. They know the truth of what things were done, whether those truths have proliferated throughout the cognition of all of us collectively. Those people know, and so sometimes it breeds a spirit of suspicion. And people are very cautious about how they receive love and help and support. The thing I would say always is, and this is kind of been a lesson that my mom has taught me from childhood until now, is to step into every situation with a listening heart. And to understand what the real needs of the people are, rather than stepping in with an aspiration or an intention to fix or change, just an intention to listen. And I think that this is best personified through one of the leaders that I really cherish, and that is Lorene Powell Jobs, who has done some pretty phenomenal work, both in helping to establish the college track organization, but now with a development organization, is looking to develop about 52 acres in the city of East Palo Alto over time. And they've got their own plans that they've been working on. Part of the reason why she has been received so widely with embrace is that when she came in, she was really listening to concerns that parents and families had about not having a local high school. She was listening to concerns about what it meant to have to transport children out of East Palo Alto into other neighboring cities for school. She was, listening to what parents and students were articulating as lack of access to people who believed in their higher aspirations for what they could actually accomplish as individuals and as people. And she took all of that listening and more and poured into College Track, where this particular nonprofit is just really focusing on providing a space of belonging for school-age children, and not just belonging, but introduces another layer of academic rigor and intellectual challenge that helps prepare more and more children for their futures in college and beyond, and that addresses a lot of the concerns that children and parents were articulating and raising at that time. And even as she looks at development, the average developer will come to a city and create a performa and really look at what it is that they can extract from a city if they're able to develop a project exactly as the Excel spreadsheet shows. Her organizations are quite a bit different. They're really looking at, what does the city need right now? Does it need more spaces for community gathering? Does it need more support for the clinic, for administrative offices? Does it need more spaces for more and larger nonprofits to operate at scale? Does it need a commerce district? What does it actually need? And after conducting some really rich listening sessions, she and her team are developing some pretty exciting plans that help address concerns and needs and thoughts that are being directly raised by residents. And she's actualizing those into plans that our residents are excited about. And this is not to project what will be approved or not approved at the council level. It's only to point out that that she steps on the scene as a listener. And she's not any old listener. She's one of the wealthiest listeners in the world. But she's really there to support, care, serve, enhance, embrace, repair. And that spirit, I think, is one that is genuinely felt, authentically received, and has really opened the door to a lot of interesting collaboration. So, there's no perfect or right way to be, but that listening servant's spirit, I think, is one of the best spirits and postures to bring forward when we're trying to repair, history, and when we're trying to make better or make right wrongs that have been done in the past, even wrongs that we may not have been directly responsible for. That sort of listening and hearing and engaging with an open heart is a posture and stance that I think really works well.
Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Absolutely.
Great. The next one is, you mentioned the many community nonprofits in East Palo Alto. What would you recommend as the best way to better understand this rich ecosystem and partner with these organizations?
Mm-hmm. So one of the best ways, if you're looking for, and again, I'll use my my technology hat here, because we have many businesses that we're interacting with individually because we're supplying software, but we also have a marketplace that allows consumers like you and I to see all of the inventory that each one of the businesses that we've activated has created. So all their classes, all of their experiences, all of their everything, we've aggregated into a marketplace. So if the question is, where is the marketplace of nonprofits for East Palo Alto where we can understand what all is there? I would say one of the best ways to understand the entire collection would be through our city clerk and PIA, who is actively communicating with these nonprofits on a routine basis and who keeps sort of the inventory of contacts and addresses and other things to best understand who to activate when. And we've had to rely on that, as you rightly pointed out, in COVID, because we've had to pull out all stops to make sure that we were doing our best to wrap our arms around testing and make testing more accessible to more residents. And now, as we really focus on fanning out vaccinations, we've had to activate a number of our nonprofits to help us get the message out and to help bring in the residents that they engage with most actively, so that we can make sure that we've got, sort of an arc of protection around everyone. So that would be a good place to start. I also think that each one of the 5 council members in East Palo Alto has their arms around a collection of nonprofits, not necessarily from a board perspective, because sometimes we find it hard to both be a board member and a council member because there's always conflicts of interest. But we definitely have different constituencies that we spend a lot of time engaging with. For example, because I am an engineer, obviously I spend a lot of time with the nonprofits that are focusing on tech and tech fluency, because it's something that I have and hold. It's something that I believe in, and it's something that I desperately want our children and our children's children to have. So you can always, work with a council member to get their view of, the nonprofits that are most useful to engage. And then the final way that I would say would be to work with our faith network. And I want to call out Stuart Hyland, who has been a tried and true staple in our faith network, trying to pull together our faith-based community and make sure that they're engaging with the parts of the community that may not be actively engaged in tech or in housing programs or in other programs, but really have a very strong orientation towards spirituality and faith. And we find that our churches do a phenomenally good job of unlocking the goodness of our residents in that direction. So those would be 3 important ways, but the biggest and easiest way, I think, would be to engage with our city clerk, who just has the collection of the total arc of nonprofits that we have, working and moving and breathing and acting upon the city of EPA.
Great, thank you. And the last one, this is a bit of a fun question. What most excites you about the future of your work in East Palo Alto?
Oh my gosh, that one will take me all day to answer, because, well, and here's the big reason. I'm excitable. I can get very enthusiastic about so many things so easily, but when I look out on our city, there are a couple of things that really make me feel good, and that really make me feel like we've got a rich and wide and exciting future ahead of us. The first is simple. I'm excited about us exiting the COVID-19 pandemic with strength. Obviously, we have a large community, many of whom are frontline and essential workers. So we've had much higher exposure than many of our neighboring cities to the virus. And then we also have 12% of our residents who do not have access to healthcare, which means that, even in cases where a resident may have felt ill or felt symptoms, they may not have had solutions readily available to support them through that. And then the final thing is that we are more dense in East Palo Alto than many of our neighboring cities. And for example, I like to use the quote that most cities around us average 2.5 people per household. We average 4.5 per household. So when we think about, just simple things like infection and infection rates associated with COVID, what you see in East Palo Alto is that the spread was just higher because of the combination of, more exposure, more people per household, and lower access to healthcare. So we've had to bridge a lot of that and make sure that even in spite of some of these challenges, that we still support and love on our residents and make sure that we make it through. So I'm excited about coming out of this tunnel. It's been a great time to learn, to connect, and to embrace each other. And I say all the time, never has there ever been a city that I've lived in where I say on Facebook, I went to the grocery store today and they were out of collard greens. And I walk out of my door at 3 o'clock that afternoon and there are fresh cut collard greens on my doorstep because someone in the city heard what I said and had either some in their garden or had access to some that they wanted to share. So COVID has taught us a lot about rediscovering the strength of community, but I'm also really excited about exiting out of this pandemic and returning our residents to what is going to be a new normal, but a new normal nonetheless. The second thing I'm really excited about is some of the strides that we're making on the housing front. I know we are known as a city that affirms the right to maintain a richly diverse population of residents. And we've been very active in our stance in helping to secure that identity by building more affordable housing. In fact, East Palo Alto has 250% of the state's standard for affordable housing, which means that we've got more affordable housing in the city of East Palo Alto than the state even mandates for a city to have. And we're still committed to making space for more. So I'm excited about the inroads that we're making there. And I'm also personally excited about some of the newer inroads that we are now starting to articulate and define in our quest to create more ownership access for more people. We typically, talk about longevity and we talk about our residents' right to be exactly where they are. And we also know that ownership goes a long way in helping to secure that. And so we are activating some programs now to help assist with that. And I'm really excited about that. Obviously, because of the nature of the community that we've engaged today, I do have to also say that I am thrilled and excited about the inroads that we've made and also where we're going with our focus on our environment, both in, expanding our canopy so that we just have more access to more fresh air and our vision for parks and open spaces. And we've got some really great collaborations now that are beginning to unfold as we design our master plan, but also bring in some pretty exciting partners like the Magical Bridge partner who has built in Redwood City and Palo Alto and is really excited to partner with us to create an accessible park space for our residents. And also as we actualize some of the projects that I talked about earlier, both in the mobility space, as we look at our developments that we are now pushing on, increasing our stance and our posture on EV codes, and also on our Creek project, which I think is sort of the next wave of project that helps to give us some assurance that we're protected against disaster. And that we really provide a blanket of protection around some of our most vulnerable residents and make sure that they hear from all of us that we affirm their presence and we're committed to their safety as well. So I think, for all of these reasons and more, including a really active and lively development pipeline of, various partners that are looking to work with us to expand our footprint in the city of East Palo Alto to increase commerce and to create more spaces for social connection and social engagement, that we have a really exciting future to wrap our arms around. And I wake up every day as a council member feeling very lucky that the people of East Palo Alto said yes when they did. I would never have imagined being a mayor inside of COVID. I don't think any new council member ever would. But what an honor to serve such an incredibly loving community of residents and to be a leader at a time when love and connection are some of the primary energies that we need to bring forward to give ourselves a sense that we can get through all of this together with a lot of strength. So bright future for us. And I'm glad to be at this table right when I am to help bring all of some of that vision to life.
There's so much to look forward to, so much excitement. Councilwoman Regina Wallace-Jones, thank you for joining us today. And Violet, if you're still there, thank you for your welcoming remarks. I'd like to thank everyone as well for attending this lecture. And we will hopefully see all of you soon. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Robbie.
Bye.